Hey y'all, welcome to another election analysis video. Today I'll be breaking down the Utah gubernatorial election for 2020. I'm gonna just get started right now. The big story is that Utah has a new governor, but don't expect much to change. Utah hasn't voted for a Democratic governor since 1980. Democrat hasn't won an election for statewide office since 1992, and Democrats have not controlled the state legislature since the 70s. Utah's voter registration statistics reveal that it is a partisan environment dominated by the Republican Party. Um, GOP supporters make up 49.8% of the population. Unenrolled voters are 33.8%, and only 14.8% are Democrats, with 1.69% being enrolled as another party. And for example, the Independent American Party or the Libertarian Party. In fact, the hardest part of the election for Spencer Cox was winning a primary battle against John Huntsman, former Utah governor and ambassador to Trump, or ambassador to Russia under Trump. Despite its lack of competition, the general election did still make national headlines when, even in a very divisive year, both Cox and Peterson appeared together in a PSA promoting civility in politics. Utah is a state that loves Republicans, but they like their Republicans moderate. That's why Trump struggled so much here in 2016. Mitt Romney had carried every county and won 72.6% of the vote in 2012, but Trump lost to and only won 45.5% of the vote just 4 years later. Although Utah is a deep red state, Attorney General Reyes faced a lot of backlash for challenging the 2020 presidential election results from both Democrats and Republicans alike in Utah. This is because Utah GOP voters tend to be more moderate. Utah's moderate nature also explains Spencer Cox's big victory. He built a personal brand that appealed to the GOP's base, but also reeled in moderate independents and Democrats. He even won 18% of voters that also voted Biden at the top of the ticket. Cox was famous as a state legislator for commuting 97 miles to the state capitol every day because he valued family so much. And his character is only developed further by the fact that as lieutenant governor, he gained national attention in 2016 for giving an emotional speech apologizing to the LGBTQ community following the Pulse nightclub shooting. Democrat Chris Peterson never raised enough money to be competitive. He's a law professor at the University of Utah. He'd never held public office before. He only won the primary because no one ran a serious campaign against him. Democrats didn't really have many strong candidates to pick from in this race in their primary. Early polls indicated a big lead for Lieutenant Governor Cox, and Peterson was simply not winning enough moderate and undecided voters to do well in Utah. As we saw earlier with that graph, or with that pie chart, the Utah voter registration statistics make it clear that the Republicans have a big advantage as long as they turn out their voters and are moderate enough. So, undecided voters, independents, were not feeling Cox as much as they needed to for him to be able to win. While Biden won 37.7% of the vote, Peterson was only able to win 31%. Cox also outperformed Trump by 6. He did so by presenting himself as more moderate. Peterson did win Grant County, a small swing county in eastern Utah, and he also won Summit County, which includes Park City. But at the end of the day, he needed to do way better in the Salt Lake City area, and as well as Provo, which is a densely populated but overwhelmingly Republican city. The Biden campaign was able to win Salt Lake County 53-42, so an 11-point margin. But Peterson was only able to win 45.5% of the vote in Salt Lake County, and he ended up losing the county by 5. Utah has a reputation for being conservative. It's overwhelmingly white, has the nation's largest Mormon population. 60% of Utahns are Mormon, and 90% of state legislators are Mormon. Even many Utah Democrats. It's one of just 10 states that also has a flat tax in any shape, way, or form. Data from the Pew Research Center shows that 45% of Utahns identify as conservative, 31% identify as moderate, 20% identify as liberal, and 4% don't know how they identify. As you can see, Republicans are able to win with such a high proportion of the population identifying as conservative. There are some blue dots in a sea of red, but there are not enough. And Democrats still struggle in big cities like Provo, Logan, Ogden, and St. George, and they have to improve in those major cities in order to improve their statewide performance. And while Utah might be a red state, it did vote to approve medical marijuana use, expand Medicaid, and introduce an independent redistricting commission, all in 2018. As an observer, this is telling me that Utahns like the Republican Party and tend to dislike the Democrats, but they don't dislike Democratic policies. And that's just goes on to show the moderate nature of Utah Republican voters that we talked about earlier. Democrats haven't had real ground game in Utah for decades, but we have seen that independent and third-party candidates can do well in Utah when Republicans go too far to the right. Look at the 2016 presidential election results and Evan McMullin, who is now on your screen. There's certainly room in Utah for third-party success, especially in three-way races. Long-term, Democrats can establish themselves in the state. A lot of people are moving to Utah from other states and bringing their politics with them. The Church of Latter-day Saints is slowly losing influence. Workers in Utah's fastest growing industries like tech, life science, and medical tend to lean left. And Democrats can gain a lot of ground in the SLC area and its suburbs. And Utah is slowly getting more and more diverse. The biggest challenge is convincing national Democrats to take Utah efforts seriously. In 2020, Biden had the strongest Democratic vote share since 1964 with Lyndon B. Johnson. But the Utah Democrats still have a long way to go. I would keep this one on a watch list along with Kansas, Alaska, and Texas, looking at the long term. But those are not states that are immediately flippable for the Democrats. This was their strongest gubernatorial result since the special election of 2010. And that was with a weak nominee like Chris Peterson. So, if they find themselves a strong candidate, I'm sure they could probably hit 35 or 40 easily. So, yeah, that's definitely a look at why Utah Democrats are having these issues, because they're not being taken seriously as a party nationally. In conclusion, Spencer Cox was able to outperform Trump, win big, and enter the governor's mansion with high approval. But Democrats in Utah aren't as weak as they seem. Some of their policy proposals have been approved through referendums, and Democrats had their best statewide performance in a decade in 2020. The mayor of Salt Lake City is also female and, in fact, a lesbian. Short term, Republicans will be fine as long as they stay moderate, but Utah is changing demographically and politically, so it's a state to watch long term, so maybe over the next 10, 20, 30 years. I do not expect it to flip in the 2020s unless it's twin independent or moderate third-party candidate. But certainly down the line, Utah is showing signs of getting bluer, especially in the Salt Lake City area. Now, I want to look at a regional analysis of this election. So first off, this is how the regions of Utah break down. And I want to stress the importance of two regions, the Wasatch Front and Northern Utah. The Wasatch Front and includes the Salt Lake City area. Northern Utah includes some big cities like Logan and Ogden. Together, these two regions include Salt Lake City, Provo, Logan, Ogden, and they also make up 86.2% of Utah's population, just those two regions. And they're right next to each other. So I believe it's I-15 that goes up that corridor. But whatever that highway is, most of Utah's population lives along it. As you can see, all the other regions are really small compared to Northern Utah and the Wasatch Front. That's why they're so important. And look at this. Democrats are not even winning in either of those regions. Democrats' strongest region was the Four Corners, where they won 40% of the vote. Their weakest region was Central Utah, where they only were able to win 9% of the vote. Another problem for Democrats in Utah is that rural Utah is pretty Republican. Republicans' strongest region was Central Utah, where they won 85% of the vote, almost. I believe it was 84.9. And in Central Utah, they were only able to crack, or sorry, not Central Utah, but in Southwest, or no, not Southwest, the Four Corners, sorry about that. They were only able to win 50% of the vote. Libertarians did particularly well in Southwest Utah, so that's the St. George area and its surroundings. The Democrats gained a lot of ground in the Four Corners region and made significant gains in Northern and Southwest Utah, but they lost a lot of support in Castle Country and Central Utah. The Libertarians were up everywhere, and the IAP candidate did pretty well in Central Utah compared with the third-party performance in 2016. And this is a look at regional turnout, high everywhere. Now I just want to kind of break down this data. As you can see, statewide, Spencer Cox won big. He had more than twice the amount of votes that Chris Peterson did. Looking at the popular vote by county, it's clear that there are 5 counties that make up 81% of Utah's population, and so they really matter. Salt Lake, Utah, Washington, Weber, and Davis are those 5 counties. You can clearly see them here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All the other counties have a pretty small impact on the statewide election results in Utah. The key for Utah Democrats is growing their support in these 5 counties. They know where a bulk of the population lives. They got to really work on selling their message and vision for the future to those voters. Salt Lake County alone makes up 37% of the state's population who voted in this 2020 election. Spencer Cox's 5-point victory there really helped him seal the deal. He even outperformed Biden significantly in Salt Lake City. That really helped him. Biden was able to crack 40% in Utah. Spencer Cox was not. Biden won 37%, so he almost got to 40. Spencer Cox, not Spencer Cox, but Chris Peterson only got 31% of the vote. Rural Utah is deep red. There were 4 counties where Democrats couldn't even break 10% of the vote. So yeah, they definitely need to improve because they are getting blown out in rural Utah. Their message is just not resonating down there. There's some rural parts of Utah where there are high Native American populations, but outside of those precincts, especially when you isolate only white rural Utah, it's a big resounding message that the voters are sending that they like the Republican Party of Utah. This is the Utah Democrats' strongest gubernatorial performance in a decade. So, they did gain ground in most counties compared to 2016. Still was definitely not enough to help them win this election, but an improvement is something. This is a look at turnout by county. It was consistently high across the state of Utah. As you can see, the lowest turnout that any county had was 84.7%. One county even got up to 93, which is very good. Democrats are very dependent on Salt Lake County. A majority of their statewide support lives there, but they need to let that grow. And so the fact that they know that so much of their base lives in Salt Lake County, they can really capitalize off of that and really target voters there and improve selling their message. Democrats are only about 40% in 4 counties, and they're below 20 in most of the rest. Rural Utah is pretty red, but they do have chances in other parts of the state. Salt Lake, Summit, and the Four Corners counties, good results for the Democrats, but in many other parts of the state, the results are beyond disappointing. There were 12 counties where Democrats were below 15%, and just 3 where the results were close. Democrats gained 5 points in St. Juan and Utah counties, and gained ground in most of the rest of them as well. Looking at the Republicans, they lean most on Salt Lake County, but unlike the Democrats, strong GOP turnout in Utah and Davis County also matters. The GOP lost ground in 25 of the 29 counties, but they were still able to win by a margin of about 2-1. So I'm not really concerned about their losses. And they even gained ground in 4 counties as well. So that's significant. Looking at the Libertarians, their pie chart looks nearly identical to that of the Republican Party. They lean a lot on Salt Lake County, but look at how important Utah is as well. Libertarians, didn't make a big splash, but they were still able to win 3 to 5% in most of Utah's counties, and even there was one where they hit 6. Or sorry, 3 where they hit 6%. Or no, that was 3 where they hit 5%, and then 1 where they hit 6. Looking at the Independent American Party, they were dependent on all 5 of the big counties, but less dependent on Salt Lake than even the Republicans and Libertarians. So they would definitely be watching Utah County. They know they can really target Utah County next time that they run candidates for statewide elections. And they did gain ground from 2016 in more counties than not, so that's a positive sign for them. And that is it. Thank you so much for tuning into this video, and I will see y'all in the next one.